Welcome back to Vetted VA Live. Every Tuesday, we get together here with Vetted VA pros and on both the real estate and the mortgage side and go through a topic that is important, that we're getting a lot of questions on in the forum. Gives us an opportunity to go in greater depth and get some of the knowledge and expertise out of these guys. So this week, what we're going to be talking about is a PCS and your VA mortgage benefit. What does it change? What does it not change? What should you be aware of? So we have a great team here to cover this with us. So I'll start here going around the horn. I've got Rylan Maddox, who's a mortgage loan originator with, I'm not even going to try it, with a Hawaiian named company in Honolulu, Hawaii. Rylan, you want to tell us how that goes?
Yeah, so it's pronounced Kama Ina Mortgage.
Perfect. And how did you find your way here to Vetted VA?
I've been actually following Vetted VA for a couple years as a retail loan officer, and I knew that I was probably going to make the switch, but for a lot of different reasons, just life was busy. And so I finally made that switch this summer and went out to the Vetted VA summer camp and took my test, and I'm currently a VBA 3, working on my seniority and whatnot to hopefully increase in rank.
Perfect. So for those of you watching at home that don't necessarily know how Vetted VA works, it's not as simple as just calling up saying, hey, I want to join. There's a fun studying and testing process. And then through your time spent moderating and answering questions for you folks at home, you work your way up the ranks. So Rylan's saying he's currently at a VVA 3. You'll notice our next guest over here to the side, Mike Alberico, and you are, Mike, in Raleigh, North Carolina, with U Mortgage and the Alberico Mortgage Group. Mike is a vetted VA 5. Why don't you tell us what that means for someone at home? It doesn't, not what it means and it matters to us, but what does that mean to someone asking questions in the forum? What does your role look like any differently than a VVA 3 or a VVA 4?
Gotcha. So I've been with Vetted since the start. When we didn't really even have a lot of organization, it was kind of like a free for all in the group, but we were still helping vets out. And so then when Christopher and Nathan rolled out the rankings, it had to go through testing like everybody else, but I had to demonstrate overall moderating abilities as well as go through multiple interviews with like Chris and Nathan. And they just basically reviewed my impact on the vetted community, on how I handled providing info and knowledge to the veterans and just different feedback from everybody else in the community. It was not an easy process. I can say that. I'm pretty sure the first interview was over an hour and had some time to prepare, but it was fun actually. And it actually has made me better professional overall, not just inside the community, but outside. It's just constant training to make us all better at our craft, and iron sharpens iron. This is the perfect place to do it, not just for VA knowledge, but just overall knowledge in general. Like I learn a lot from the real estate pros here that I'll let you introduce to one of the best next.
1,000%. I say every week we show up. The real estate professionals that join the group are sort of a different breed. The loan pros, we're all pretty similar, but the realtors are unique in their field, in that they're very committed to veterans, and they know the loan stuff almost as good as we do. Sometimes, better than most of the loan officers they're coming across, because they're used to correcting and teaching loan officers what can and can't be done with the VA program. So, Alexis, you are in Memphis. You are a realtor that have built your business around serving veterans. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you found your way here to Vetted VA?
Hello. So yes, I am in Memphis, Tennessee. I found my way into Vetted VA because I was seeking out a community that serves the same demographic that I serve, and that's military families and veterans. It was my honor to be asked to join. Like Mike, I did testing, but not as thorough. I'm a VBA 4. And I just like networking and helping military families and veterans all across the country. And I'm able to achieve that here in Vetted VA.
Perfect. And last but certainly not least, we've got Brandy Brickler out of Austin, Texas with Edge Home Finance. How about yourself, Brandy? How did you find your way to Vetted VA?
I was introduced to Vetted VA from a friend when I was actually in the process of moving myself. I am a veteran myself and was a 23-year military spouse. And so this community, I've been in mortgage lending for 9 years, and this has almost 100% been my focus because these are my peers. So I was introduced, and I'm like so thrilled to be a part of this group that is impacting the veteran community.
Awesome. Well, let's jump into today's topic. Alexis, why don't we start with you? I'm going to assume most people who would be watching and be interested in the show know what PCS stands for and what it means. Why don't you give us a little bit of a background as a realtor, what that means to you when you have a client coming to you in the process?
Well, PCS is permanent change of station. So that is when a service member and their dependents, if applicable, will move duty stations. And that's actually how I ended up here. My husband is recently retired from the Navy. So we PCS, and I'm very familiar with that process. So typically what happens with me is I get someone reaching out to me, inquiring about the area and home buying. And I walk them through the steps. My clients come from all over the country and also all over the world. So making sure that I provide as much information as possible about the area, amenities that the base offers, and get to know them and see what amenities are important to them and their families.
And does that call any different than, say, a local retired veteran calls you, or just an average citizen, that's not a veteran, not active duty or retired, just calling and saying, "Hey, I'd like to buy a house"? Are there some issues that come up a little bit different for someone going through the PCS process?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, people PCSing are typically up against a time crunch where often a local buyer, they maybe can casual shop. Someone coming in, they are under a time crunch. They need to get somewhere. They get nervous or excited, I'll say, about securing home for their family. So I have to get right in, understand the report by date, the number of dependents in their family, and also connecting them with a loan professional who understands the VA home loan.
So absolutely, and we've got three and a half good loan officers here that we can go through the lending side of it, and we'll work our way through that. I kind of want to start with the real estate side, just so we can kind of work our way through that. We've been in a crazy market for the last couple of years, crazy in one way and then shifting, changing, normalizing. When you're local to an area, you kind of get a strong feel for the market. When you're getting shipped across the country or across the world, that's a little bit different. How do you educate a potential buyer who's coming brand new to an area on what to expect or what your current market looks like?
Well, first, I know what it's like to be in my client's shoes because we PCS here from Japan. So I know exactly what it's like to be my clients, and I start with questions that are going to be important to me. I let them know things that I've learned about the local market in the area from a military family perspective, whether it's letting the spouse know what's going on here from an employment standpoint. Explaining the uniqueness of the duty station. This is primarily a Navy base that I serve, so this is considered shore duty. So I kind of walk through that. It's a good way for me to connect and explain to them the uniqueness. There's no deployments here, so people can get back to family time. So I help establish that connection. I discuss kids' sports. Not only do I talk about it, but it's also I help guide them into the direction where they can find those resources for themselves. So whether it's like Pop Warner football, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, that sort of things, or the local gym, that sort of stuff.
Perfect. So once you've kind of gone through, you have a pretty solid handle on their situation, when they're coming, what they need, made them aware of all of the things they need to know. If they haven't already been connected with a lender, what you said is, hey, we need to get them with a lender. So Mike, Rylan, Brandy, why don't we just start with Mike? We'll kind of work our way around the horn. How do you handle that conversation when you find out someone is having a change of station and relocating and working with them through that process?
Yeah, it's really important, just to kind of build off of what Alexis said is, they're coming from different places. Like one of the last people I helped was Coast Guard coming from Alaska to northeastern North Carolina. So you have to work with someone that understands the time changes. Like, I try and make myself available. We all have families, but when he needs to take a call at 10 o'clock at night Eastern because he's not on a boat, that's important when you're finding professionals. Same with from the real estate standpoint of this guy never saw the house until he closed. He found a trusted realtor. It was all FaceTime showings. That's another thing to consider, because he couldn't even make time to fly in from Alaska to North Carolina. So taking those into consideration is big, is, you know, trying to build your schedule around that serviceman or woman's work schedule is challenging in itself. But just making sure they understand the process, getting as much done up front as possible is really important, because are they going to sign on base with a JAG officer before they get here? Are they flying in? Is there going to be a POA involved with a spouse signing for them? Do they understand what a live and well cert is? So my 2 cents is work with someone that understands PCSing, because the more you do up front, the less challenges you'll have down the road, because that was actually an easy one where I've helped folks coming from Japan as well. So that's, I'll leave off there. Just due diligence up front to make sure that they understand the process, that everybody involved in here, from attorney, title company, realtor, et cetera, all understand the timeline is huge for folks PCSing, because it's not moving from Charlotte to Raleigh, which is 2.5 hours. Sometimes it's 6 time zones or even more.
Absolutely. And, you know, I feel like it's funny, Alexis, the stuff that you're dealing with, and you have a local product. We obviously deliver that product locally, but the mortgage side's kind of virtual. So Brandy, for us in our business, where even when I have clients here in Huntington Beach where I'm at, they still most times don't want to come see me. We're going to do everything through the computer and online. Does that change at all for you with someone that's PCSing? Does it make it easier, less stressful? Any difference between that borrower and any other borrower?
Yeah, I was just going to say there is like an innate trust between service members. And as soon as I get on the phone with clients and then I tell them, oh, look, I've done that before. I've PCS before. I completely understand the process. You know, all of their acronyms and things that are happening in their life and the things that the realtors are having to deal with as well. As soon as they hear that in my voice, and like, we don't ever have to meet, we don't ever have to like see each other in person. But I mean, they feel that and they feel that from knowing that they're talking to a trusted professional, especially like people that they've met through Vetted VA. Of course, we also have to know what they're going through.
And that's part of what the training is. We alluded to it earlier. You know, it's fairly extensive. Christopher, who created Vetted VA, has made a process where you can't just say, hey, I've done VA loans. Sort of in prepping for this, I was Googling some things, and Google's very good at giving you YouTube videos. And there is a girl who has a big channel here in California, and she does a ton of VA business. She made a really good point. Like, realtors will often refer out their person, say, oh, my person's awesome at doing VA loans. And you look and they've done 2 in their life. What I like to say, for me here in Orange County, California, almost all of the LA County bases were shut down 20, 30 years ago. So obviously San Diego, we have a lot. There are still active duty in California, especially if you're in the San Diego area. You'll notice a lot of our VVA pros are located down there because there's a lot of active duty veterans. But for me, the biggest learning process in coming through here was realizing how different the process is, whether they're PCSing or not, just active duty. There's a whole, like you guys said, I don't come from a military background. I have family that's military. I appreciate, honor, and respect, and I love being a part of this community, but it's a lot. You kind of have to jump in and really immerse yourself into understanding all of these things, because if you can't explain the terminology, or you're talking to a veteran and they're throwing out things at you, you're like, what did they just say? I have no idea what they're talking about. And hopefully, if they're talking to a loan officer that doesn't know what they're talking about, they pick that up pretty quickly, because the VA loan itself is simple, but the unique needs of the veteran are not. So that's sort of where that comes in. Ryland, anything you think we haven't covered yet that you'd like to add in terms of that PCS process and how you like to help your clients? And on that topic, in Hawaii, you guys have a good chunk of active duty, right?
Yeah, we have, and I apologize for the microphone if it's backfading, but yeah, we have actually quite a bit of active duty. And it's interesting what Mike and I think Alexis said. A lot of my military doesn't even start shopping until they get on island, at least my clientele. And so I have had a few people buy sight unseen, but most of the time, my active duty that's PCSing into Hawaii, ideally we're connecting ahead of that and getting them pre-approved. But then they're looking for houses and submitting offers in that 30-day, 45-day, 60-day TLA window. And it's a very do or die situation. They have to find a house they like, submit an offer, and get it accepted. And then we have to close that loan in 30 days, ideally, or less. And so time is of the essence, and we really have to be on it. The main thing that I'm having my conversations, looking at the mic, the main things I'm having my conversations with clients is, especially active duty, you can pull a lot of the documents that lenders need online, because as they're PCSing, a lot of their documents are in household goods. And so your trusted professional needs to know ways around if something is in household goods. I'm thinking maybe like a social security card or some other documents that aren't your standard LES, W-2s, and bank statements. If there's something the lender requires that you have being shipped, hopefully that lender has workarounds and has come across that situation before and knows how to guide you so that it doesn't, it's just a small hurdle that we need to overcome and not a showstopper where a simple document keeps you from getting that house, right? Divorce decrees, I think, are one of the largest things that we see PCSing veterans get surprised by and then have trouble getting a hold of. And so I found a lot of success on that specific document, trying to reach back out to the county court and pulling it that way. A lot of divorce decrees are public records, so there's a few public record search engines that you can utilize as well. But that's what I would say. Time is of the essence for PCS borrowers. If they're shopping for homes when they arrive, you need to work with a trusted professional who is familiar enough with the VA loans that they can also work very quickly with you without you have enough stresses moving. So as a lender, I'm always trying to be cognizant of let me kind of feel the stress behind the scenes as much as possible, and always be kind of coming back to my client, calm, collected nature, everything above water is fine. Because they have their family life that they've picked up and moved and set down in a potentially a strange place they've never been before. And so the last thing they want is to feel your stress of gathering documents or going over underwriting guidelines, stuff like that. So that's maybe something that I try and keep in mind.
You made an interesting point that a lot of your people will show up on island basically ready to start shopping for homes, and then we have a short and condensed timeline. Alexis, in your market in Memphis, is that common where folks
Absolutely
show up?
Not. No. So, and this might also be unique to the duty station. The base that I primarily serve is a base that individuals have. It's a shore duty, which obviously the Navy is out to sea. So you have to interview to be here. It's an admin base, and it's top heavy, mostly senior enlisted, senior officers. When we got orders here, my husband knew a year out. That's kind of uncommon, but we knew a year out. And also we were PCSing from overseas. So if you're coming from a deployable command, depending on your orders and where you're to, it's not uncommon to, for me at least, to have people that I'm talking to people right now that aren't coming till June next year. So kind of like what Rylan was saying, helping them establish early, hey, you're going to need these docs. Don't pack them. Don't pack your passport, that sort of stuff. Make a game plan. Make sure that you have secured base lodging if possible. Get on the waiting list for housing. That's important too. Here where I'm at, it's not a good idea just to show up and expect you could just hit the ground running. You have to have a backup plan. We're not a transient area. So it's important for service members when they're PCSing to reach out to professionals to kind of establish before they get to the area, to kind of establish, hey, what's norm there, what's not, especially if you're going from a large military installation area to somewhere small.
Absolutely. And sort of following along those lines, what I'm hearing here is people just, not active duty, non-veterans. The question I get all the time is, it's a little early. When should I don't know if I should talk to a lender. Is it
it's never too early
to get pre-approved? And it almost sounds like in the PCS situation, it is truly never too early. If you're a year out, 6 months out, it really. So I mean, some of these conversations that you two are talking about here, Rylan and Alexis, in terms of not packing stuff, if you wait until right before, you could already, well, hey, I don't have any of my stuff. It's all in
That's
boxes.
right.
And that one really important thing is unavailable. So I can't stress enough. I always tell people, I had someone tell me today that we were introduced by a realtor and they said, we're not ready to get pre-approved. I'll reach out when I am. I said, I don't care if you don't want to get pre-approved. Can we have a 10-minute conversation
That's
and talk
right.
about what you're thinking about doing? What
That's
in your
right.
just in your mind's eye, the littlest thing, is it a condo? Is it 3 months from now? Is it 12 months from now? What questions, what worries, what concerns do you have? Because once you open up that dialogue, we as professionals, whether it's on the mortgage side or the real estate side, can do so much better job of prepping you in terms of what you need to be aware of. So
Add
with
something in?
sure.
Can I add something in? When we say it's like never too early, sometimes it's too early, which might lead us into our next topic, which is when you may get orders. So we get a lot of conversations or people that talk to us and they say, we're probably going to go there. And so we as professionals really can't help you until you actually have orders. And so even penciled in orders are kind of sketchy, but like hard copy orders are super important for us to be able to do our job and qualify you based on BAH or COLA for the area that you're going to purchase.
Well, here, that is a great transition. Why don't you walk us through when someone gets their orders? What is in there? I mean, I'm assuming anyone active duty that's been PCS knows what their orders look like, but everyone knows what their W-2 and their pay stub looks like. They still don't know what us on the mortgage side actually think is important there. What info is in there that is important to you as a mortgage professional that you need to know to get them the answers they need and prepare them to buy?
Well, we all know that, I mean, if you've been in the military or been connected with the military, you know that orders can kind of change on a dime sometimes, or you can be penciled in to go somewhere and things could change. And what's most important about that is your housing allowance. And so when you get orders to a specific base, we know exactly which housing allowance we're qualifying you on. So we're not qualifying you on your previous base housing allowance. We have to look at what you're going to be getting. I mean, I did most of my business for 9 years in Hawaii. And so I was qualifying people on a significantly different BAH than, say, South Carolina. And so it's super important for us to know where you're going. Do you have dependents? How long do you plan to be there? Right? I mean, it's an intention of the VA loan that you're going to at least occupy and you know, there is not a law that says a year, but you do sign the military homebuyers checklist that says you intend to occupy for at least a year. So we need to know how long you're going to be there, if you have dependents, BAH, and what entitlements additionally you might get for being there.
What type of entitlements might show up? And I guess there was two questions for me. I'm sitting here going, it's important for people to know that if they're used to seeing their LES and saying, hey, there's my BAH, I mean, they know that it may change, but again, most people don't think in terms of how is my lender looking at it. And depending on where you're going from a low cost area to a high cost, you're like, yay, for me, I've got more. You're going from a high cost area to a low cost area. You might think, hey, I've got this much to qualify with, and you're not going to. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, if you're working with a professional who understands the military and a leave-in earnings statement, then you understand, are they going to a ship? Are they coming from a ship? Are they entitled to any additional pays, sub pay, special pay, cost of living adjustments, especially entitlements that they might lose by leaving the command that they're at. So let's just say they're on a ship now and they're getting CPay, but they're going to the middle of Tennessee. It would be silly for me as a lender to qualify them using, ship pay because they're going to a land base. So it's really important for us to be able to know what entitlements we can and cannot include during your PCS.
That's 100% correct, Brandy. I mean, that goes back to where we were earlier about working with someone that understands this. And I won't name the online lender's name, but I just ran into this. They were coming from Hawaii to North Carolina, and their ratios were tight, especially in this rate environment. And the servicemen understood red flags because the LO, and not to pick on anybody, but it just requires education and learning your craft. Didn't know what BAH was and didn't know what PCS was. And they were utilizing their Hawaii BAH to go to North Carolina, which luckily we could squeeze it in, but it was a huge difference in their ability to qualify. And that's just kind of piggyback on working with the proper professionals.
And that, like, it goes back to, it's not a knock on that person. They could be great at loans. They could be great at analyzing pay stubs. But a leave and earning statement is a little bit different, and it's very different when someone's getting transferred around the country. I mean, Brandy, you went through like 6 different things that could change there. And again, if you're talking to a kid in a call center for a big box lender, they're just not going to have that level of experience of knowing what that looks like. And the crazy thing is, the veteran may be aware. If they've been shipped around the world for the last 15 years, they're going to know these things and go, well, wait, this is what my BAH is now. This is what it's going to look like here. And this is going away. And this is getting added. But younger veterans don't have that level of experience, and they need to make sure they're working with someone that can walk them through that process.
So just to add real quickly, because I think what you had originally asked is what are lenders looking for on orders, and I just wanted to answer that same thing on the LES, because a lot of times I ask men and women, servicemen and women, can you please send your LES and XYZ, and they come back to me and say, well, my pay is going to change when I get to Hawaii. And so what a lender's really looking for on that LES mainly is your rank, your years in service, and your ETS date, along with any deductions you already have. And we also can see if you already have dependents on there. And so we're using those fields, not necessarily the income you're currently receiving, but we're using all the other information that we can garner off that LES to accurately qualify you with the duty station that you're going to be PCSing to and that pay. So for me, I'm looking for those kind of big red flags. Like if your end of service date is in a couple months, now I know I need to have that conversation with the veteran. Are you going to re-enlist, or what's the situation? And for those that don't know, lenders can only use that active duty military pay if you have 12 months of additional time left after you close. So if you're closing and you're not going to have that year of service left, then we have to come up with a plan or a solution on how to qualify you, because we won't be able to use that active duty income.
And the worst case scenario is that person that has like 11 months, because if you got 2 months, it's it's not as difficult to go out and get a job lined up where we can look at that. But 11 months away, there's not a lot of employers going, yeah, I've got something lined up for you, and here's a letter, and your lender will take my word for it that you're going to get hired at the end of that time frame. So we've talked kind of on the front end of getting the borrowers qualified, getting them pre-approved. Alexis is going to get them out and looking at houses and knowing what they need. What's different in the closing process, or what could be different in the closing process for someone active duty? You guys hinted at it earlier. Mike, you had talked about some of the things like a power of attorney, who they're going to be signing with. You want to go into a little bit more detail on what some of the intricacies of that can be, and why we as lenders would like to know what that's going to look like at closing?
Yeah, that's huge, because a lot of states vary on what needs to actually be wet sign. Like they can do hybrid closings, some can do e-closings. But it also goes back to how you've planned up front, because if you've done a lot of planning, and this happens with a lot with active duty that has family, they want to move there and have a house ready. They don't want to have temporary housing or be in a rental for 6 months. So they'll sometimes either fly out or do the FaceTime, but they may not be getting here until a week or two after they close. So are they going to fly themselves in and then fly back? In North Carolina, if the veteran's on the mortgage, but the spouse isn't, the spouse still has to sign documents the way North Carolina law is set up. So is she going to be available, or is he going to be available? So it's mainly planning upfront of where you're signing. Wiring funds is a big one, making sure if you're overseas, you might not be able to wire funds. VA is 100% financing, but there sometimes are funds needed at closing. They may choose to put some down payment down to reduce their monthly payments. So there's a lot of intricacies of the closing. If there's a POA, it has to be approved up front. Active duty, we mentioned earlier, you have to do an alive and well cert the day of closing with the commanding officer to make sure that everything is good to go. And I mean, there's a whole lot more, but that's the biggest thing is closing day is the celebration day. But if you don't have all your ducks in a row, it can go sideways really quick.
On a purchase loan for all three of you, Brandy, Ryland, Mike, any lenders that you work with that are not okay with closing with the power of attorney for one or the other spouse or another family member with VA loans on a purchase?
No, I've never had any issue with a power of attorney. Like most lenders will allow a power of attorney, but there is a special power of attorney sometimes. So we do have to like have that power of attorney up front so we can send it through underwriting and make sure that the attorneys approve the verbiage in that power of attorney to get it closed. So it's not something that can come up last minute. We have to know that like pretty early in the loan process so we can plan for that.
I'd like to add something to the power of attorney topic. So kind of like towards the spouses who are experiencing the PCS, if the service member is deployed or about to deploy, you need to come up with an action plan for the POA, because if they're Navy and they're sitting out in the middle of the ocean, they can't get the papers FedEx back to whatever stage you're closing in to help with the power of attorney. And understand that the power of attorney that you're getting at the pre-deployment brief that kind of gives everybody, you could buy a car or handle the bank account. That's not the same power of attorney that's going to be needed when you purchase a home. Okay, so it has to be very specific, and you need to establish that early so that way if the service member has to obtain that POA, they can do so with the JAG or similar, and then mail it. If they're overseas, they can mail it from a friendly port via mail, so that way it's back in time and there's no last minute stressing. And also, if you're trying to establish POA for someone who's like on a submarine or in their special forces, it's not as easy as Mike said is to get like a CO or a department head to verify of an alive and well if the service member is disabled. So it's also going to be important for a spouse to establish a checkpoint of who is going to be the POC, the point of command stateside, who can verify that. And oftentimes that's going through like in the Navy, we call it an ombudsman, a family readiness group, things like that. So look out for those individuals ahead of time so that way you're prepared and it's a less stress on you.
So for those of you watching at home, I go back to, again, the expertise and the knowledge of regularly working with veterans in terms of the real estate side, in terms of the mortgage side, because the loans truly themselves, for the guidelines, it's probably the most flexible loan that we deal with, but it's the background stuff, all of the millions of little intricacies that we don't really see with standard borrowers, that it's very important to have an expert on your side, not just someone that knows loans and says, yes, I've closed VA loans before. I want to transition.
Sorry, Josh, I'll just add
Sure.
one thing. This doesn't also just apply to active duty. If you're a veteran and a private military contractor, this applies to you guys as well. And just because you're out of service, if you're using your VA benefit and you're working overseas as a PMC, you still have to follow these rules. So don't let that get confused. It's a VA specific, not a active duty specific.
Correct.
Perfect.
And just real quick, I want to throw in, because it's tripped me up a couple times, make sure you're giving the POA to title as well, title and escrow, because they have to sign off on it. And the lender can be good with it. Everyone can be good with it. And if title doesn't want it, and my situation was a service member on a submarine who went dark, and luckily they surfaced long enough for his military email to come through, and he was able to get done what he needed to do. But it was one of those things where we potentially weren't going to be able to close because there was blanks left, and title didn't like that there was unused blanks on the POA, and it was a thing. So.
The devil's in the details. One of the things that, as I'm listening here, that I again like to point out and remind all borrowers, but veteran borrowers, anyone PCSing, tell your team, get a team of people that you trust and tell them everything. Our job is to edit that story so that the lender, title, escrow are hearing exactly what they need to. But if you don't tell us, it's very hard to make sure that that's getting put together properly. A lot of times we'll have borrowers that are smart high level people and they're like, well, I'm going to do it this way, or I want to do this. We live in a very strange world. The mortgage world is like bizarro land. There are things that you can and can't do, and real estate is no different. So it may be perfectly logical the way you're thinking of doing something, and anywhere else in the world would work. But on our side, just talk through what you're thinking of doing. Any questions, there's no dumb questions, there's no questions too small. I'm sure if you guys are like me, you get borrowers all the time. I'm sorry to be asking this question, I'm sorry to bother you again. They know, please bother me as much as possible. What I don't want is the person who's making my life easy by not asking any questions and not reaching out. Before we transition to the complexities of if you have a departing residence that you need to either rent out or sell, anything that you guys think we haven't covered on that front end of getting your PCS orders and starting to get your ducks in a row in terms of getting pre-approved, getting with the realtor, what else should we talk about before I make that transition?
Do not put an offer on a home until you have hard orders.
Yes.
Okay. Don't do it.
Just to circle back to the how soon is too soon and XYZ, the other thing to keep in mind is your credit score. If you get started earlier, then a lender can start helping you build up that credit score in anticipation of purchasing, hopefully get you better interest rates and qualify for more. And unfortunately, a lot of veterans do need some credit help. So getting started on that conversation earlier is never a bad thing. And yeah, and don't sign up for that, what is it, finger hut? If you can avoid it.
It sounds like you've seen a few of those on the credit report that were not positive for you.
Yeah.
So with that, we've kind of been talking about the hypothetical of a veteran who is just unfettered, doesn't have a residence they're leaving behind, and gets to jump into the wonderful world of home buying. Alexis, how does it change if that person has a home at their current duty station? What are their options? What do they need to be aware of? How does that conversation change for you, that initial conversation?
Well, actually, that conversation has just changed dramatically the last couple of weeks that I have with people. So you're going to want to have an agent if you have a home to sell at your current duty station or wherever you're moving from. And this also applies not just for active duty, but anyone in general. You need to talk to a local real estate professional there to establish what are current market conditions. Currently in my market, it's not uncommon for homes to sit on the market for about 14 days right now. Okay. So if you're expecting to PCS, let's say you want to have your home closed here by January 1 of 2023, we need to be talking about putting your home on the market here in the next couple of weeks. So that way we allow ourselves enough time for escrow. Now, often for military PCSing, often they want to utilize their VA home loan benefit. So while you're talking to a local real estate professional about listing your house, you also need to talk to a loan professional of establishing, do you have enough VA loan entitlement should your home not sell at your current duty station, and can you buy at the next duty station? So that's very important as well, because you kind of have to have a smooth transition. If you don't have enough entitlement left, then you're going to maybe have to go with another loan type. But it's going to be important to also make sure that your real estate professional at your current duty station who's selling your house is in some sort of contact with your real estate agent where you're going. So that way, should your home get under contract at your current duty station, they can provide the real estate contract to your agent at your new duty station. So that way, when you're submitting offers on homes at the new duty station, the offers can be submitted that include your current home contract. And that is what we call a contingency to sell when we put offers in like that.
So it increases the complexity a good bit. So I just posted a link. We did an entire episode on second tier entitlement and explaining the intricacies of it. So without putting anyone on the spot, Brandy, Mike, Ryland, any of you want to jump in and explain how a veteran can have two VA loans at one time?
I just answered a post in Vetted VA about this actually. So it's very simple. It's your entitlement charged minus the entitlement of the county that you're buying in, and then multiplied back up by 4 to get the purchase price that's left over. So quick math, I'll use Hawaii because I'm familiar with it. The county loan limit currently is 980,700 or 978,800, sorry. And so there's about 242,000 of entitlement. If someone has a standard home on the mainland with 36,000 charged, you would subtract that from the Hawaii entitlement. That would give you your 2,000 and 2,000 and change, multiplied back up by 4. You have about 800,000 left to 100% finance. And if you wanted to go over that amount with a second, third, fourth, fifth VA loan, you just have to bring in 25% of that overage as your own down payment. That's the basics. If I didn't mess that up, Brandy and Mike, my seniors.
So in a lot of situations, a veteran can get into a second property, again with zero down, if they're going to a high cost area or they came out of a high cost area where they've used a bunch of their entitlement. They still may be able to use it with a down payment, and that still may be better than a conventional loan. The interest rates on VA loans are great. That down payment can be very little to 15-18% or more, depending on how much of that entitlement is used. But it's very important that you know that you can have 2 VA mortgages, and that you're working with someone that understands the wonderful calculation that Rylan just walked through for us. How about if they want to rent out that property? Brandy, is it okay for a veteran with a VA loan? They're leaving that area, or are they okay to rent it? Is anything change in terms of your qualifying on that new mortgage if you're going to rent that property out versus selling it? And we kind of already covered how it handles it impacts your entitlement, but how does that impact your qualifying when you still have that home?
Yeah, well, we can definitely, as mortgage lenders, use rental income to offset your mortgage, but we can't use rental income if it hasn't been rented for more than 2 years. Then we can't use that to increase your qualifying. So if that makes sense, so it can offset your mortgage, and we have to know about it prior. So we're, doing all the calculations to make sure that we're qualifying you properly. And when you're departing that residence, some lenders are going to want to see an actual lease and a deposit sometimes. So you can't just say, oh yeah, we're going to rent it, and not provide evidence to an underwriter that we're going to use that income to offset that mortgage. And then of course the entitlement piece of, whatever is tied up in your previous loan that you're departing residence, then has to be accounted for in what entitlement you qualify on the buy side again.
So something that we didn't cover is the restoration of entitlement. Let's say you're in Hawaii and you have $1.2 million VA loan, and you're going to be selling that home when you're coming back here to the mainland. That entitlement needs to be restored. How does that process work for someone who's selling and going to be buying either concurrently a couple days later or a week or two later?
Yeah, I was going to.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. You go ahead, Mike.
Sorry. I was going to say, it can be pretty quick. I've done same day closings in the morning and the one in the afternoon. You just essentially have to get your settlement statement over showing that you sold the other property. And then your loan officer that's helping you purchase a new property gets it uploaded to the VA's website, and they understand the sense of urgency on that and restore it. A lot of times lenders will let you sign your closing documents, but they'll make it a funding condition, meaning just because you signed, they're not going to disperse monies and record until you get that updated certificate eligibility showing that entitlement restored. So if you're doing that same day, it's important to either speak with that title company law office right at the beginning of signing to work on getting that settlement statement over to the new to your mortgage professional so that they can work on that.
Go ahead.
Well, I don't want to set anyone up for failure, but I have done this in the past, and unless something's changed, I want to throw it out there. There are some lenders that if the lender actually has 60 days, I believe, to get the guarantee on the loan. And I've worked with lenders in the past that we just provided the final settlement statement of the sale of the house as the funding condition without getting the COE restored. We prove to the lender that the COE legally will be restored, and it's a post-close condition to get that restored CD or COE, to the lender. But I've closed loans without the COE from the VA showing the restoration. We had to have the other house sold, recorded, and done though prior to funding.
We don't even have to do that anymore, Rylan. We're on speed dial to the regional loan centers. We just call them right up, and we're like, "Can you do this for me?"
It's funny. The government gets a bad rap. Government agencies get a bad rap, but the regional HOCs have been very helpful. Whether it's answering questions on hairy files, fixing sticky situations with COEs that don't have accurate information, aren't showing up. By all means, there can be things where government records get lost, mixed up, and we've got issues. But for the most part, they do go the extra mile to help us on the lending side, help veterans and see things in the veterans benefit. Anything else that we didn't cover in terms of a departing residence that's being retained either to rent or to sell? Anything else you guys wanted to go through?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, go ahead, Brandy.
Yeah. I think I wanted to touch on something while it's still in my brain. Over like where you are physically, it actually matters when we're talking about like funding and recording for closing.
Yes.
So when we're in all these different states, it's super important because when you sign your paperwork does not actually mean that you're closed. You're not closed until the title company has received the physical loan documents. So if you're signing in some random state because you stopped to see your parents and you got a notary there, but you're buying a house in Hawaii, then, it's going to take several days for you to sign that paperwork for it to get to Hawaii. And then Hawaii is one of those places where it takes actually, 4 days to close. You have to sign, you have to fund the following day, and there's 2 days to record. So it's important to know those timelines and physically where you are and how long it's going to take that, and that you plan that into your PCS as well.
Can I just add real quick? We were talking about PCSing from overseas. If you're not using a POA and you're signing in person and you plan on signing at the embassy, schedule that ahead of time. I've seen embassy timelines sometimes a month out to get in front of a notary. And so that's something to be cognizant of if you're signing overseas and you plan to sign at the U.S. Embassy, schedule that as early as you can.
While I'm not a loan officer, I'm a real estate agent. I would like to add that I am a military spouse. So I'm often looking at things from a military spouse perspective. Since every time I have PCS, I've been accompanying my husband on his active duty orders. And that is when the family is sitting down to discuss the potential of buying at a new duty station. You have to take into account that you might be going from 2 incomes to 1. And that jobs might not transfer. And I know the spouses that are watching this know where I'm getting at. It's you might have a job where you are, and then you're trying to find a job where you're going to. The last couple of years, we've had a lot of work from home and things like that due to COVID. But keep that in mind too when you're budgeting for your house at the next duty station. That things that you're accustomed to now might change if you go down from 2 incomes to 1. And when you're trying to get pre-approved, the lender's not going to take into account that you're going to get a job. They're going to take into account if you physically have a job that's going to be readily available when you arrive at the current duty station.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on that, Alexis. They're not going to, if the current employer will let you work remotely, they're not going to take your word on that. You're going to physically need something from that HR department stating that because you're moving to this location, it's not going to impact your job because they might say, well, I live in Raleigh and I work from home, that if I go to Texas, that my employer will be like, well, that's a little bit different because you're not by the office. They won't just take your word for it. You have to get that from your HR. And that's another part of planning up front. I would get that letter as quickly as possible so that your loan officer can provide that to underwriting up front rather than have to get something. Or if you're moving and then you're trying to chase down HR while you're moving to get that letter.
And you guys, we all get the same question. We all get the same things. I'll have borrowers say, well, yeah, my wife has been a nurse for 23 years and nurses are in high demand. So she'll get a job within like 5 minutes when we get there. cool story, but until she actually has the job, I cannot use that income. So it's important to know if you're with an employer that can transfer you, fantastic. If you're an employer that will let you work remotely, great. If you are in a high demand industry and you are the greatest teacher, nurse, welder, whatever it is, and know that you'll get a job instantly when you hit the ground, it doesn't work. We have to know that that job is in place to use that income. So, a really good point, Alexis, because a lot of times we have a spouse who is sort of getting drug around the world, and thankfully they are in demand and can get a job, but it's often not the case that that job is lined up before arriving and trying to get into the home. So we've been going about 50 minutes. I feel like we've covered this pretty darn well, but I want to kind of go around the horn here before we close up and let everyone share their final thoughts and what you like the audience to know, what you like your borrowers, buyers to know about this process, or just any final words of wisdom. So I want to end with Alexis. We're going to let the realtor have the final word. So let's start with Brandy, then we'll go to Ryland, and we'll go to Mike, and I'll finish up with Alexis.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is, I think that we touched on, is that you have to tell your loan officer everything. We require documents, and we're never going to ask you for anything that we don't need. And I think one of the most important things is you really need to speak with a loan officer. You can't just go, well, my BAH is XYZ, and I'm going to qualify for XYZ amount of dollars when I purchase a home. Because the nuances of each state is different. You know, in Texas, property taxes are high. In Hawaii, there's a lot of HOA fees that are very high. So you need to be working with a professional that understands both the VA loan and the nuances of like where you're shopping.
Absolutely. Ryland, how about your thoughts?
So just to reiterate, definitely get started early if you can. Talking and starting that conversation and diving deep into just your personal financial scenario, I think is so important. The other aspect that I think we talked about, but I'm not sure if it was fully covered. So on a departing residence, make sure your lender allows it, but a comparative market analysis of what your house could rent for, and that it's a strong rental market, meaning that you could easily rent your house in 30 days or less and cover the mortgage. Some lenders will accept in lieu of that lease and security deposit. So keep that in mind. And then also for the spouses, a job offer letter with no contingencies, a start date before your first mortgage payment, and your stated pay can sometimes be used. Again, work with your trusted professional to make sure the lender will allow it, but can be used to use that income if you are PCSing. And yeah, that's all I have.
Great info. Mike?
Yeah, I'll reiterate a lot of the same. Proper planning leads to correct execution on something like this. And like everybody already said, it's not too early to prepare. Like I actually had someone reach out to me today that's coming to Fort Bragg in July. It's like, well, let's look now. I'll even do a soft credit inquiry. If you're worried about your credit, that'll at least give me enough information to plan accordingly. You know, we can't run our computer underrated system off that, but it'll at least give us the credit scores, get an idea what debts are. I can see what your BAH is going to be here. And if you want to even take it a step further, if you're inside like 90 days of closing, a lot of our lending partners will fully underwrite the file ahead of time. And that way you're getting a lot of boxes checked. And if you're in a competitive market, like in our area, where Fort Bragg's at, yeah, we're seeing stabilization around North Carolina, but they're still one of the lowest inventories in the state. So it is a competitive market. And if you're coming in and you find the house and want to jump on it quickly, if the more you have done up front, the stronger your offer will be and the smoother that process will be.
Words to live by. All right, Alexis, we're ready for you.
So first, I'd like to say to my military families, take a deep breath, make a plan, set aside paperwork, allow yourself an opportunity to write down what you and your family need at the next duty station, what you're looking for, whether it's your kids' IEPs, proximity to base, all that good stuff. But it's also staying in constant communication with your professionals in your transaction. Again, I'm a real estate agent, not a loan professional, but if you get pre-approved, we're talking about getting everything early, and that's great. But you could get pre-approved for something, and then 4 months later, the rates can change. So you're going to want to stay in contact with your loan professionals and also your agent to make sure that you stay within budget. Because if your family's anything like mine, we were only in duty stations about 36 months, and it's time to rotate to the next one. And you want to make sure that you set your family up the best that you can financially, okay? And also, if you have questions, don't go to Google. Call your trusted professionals, Facebook message them, email them, whatever you do by a form of communication, depending where you are in the world. But definitely go to the source directly for facts, and utilize Vetted VA because it's awesome in here, right?
Absolutely. And that, that piece is kind of where I always close out the show, in that we do this to be able to go in greater depth on a topic than what we're able to just in answering questions and, 20 lines of text, or even if we throw a video answer up. This lets us cover a topic in much greater depth, and it lets you guys at home see the real people, the real professionals on the real estate and mortgage side who are out there answering the questions that you post every day. So if anything comes up and it's not Tuesday night at 5 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern, you can jump in and ask a question 24 hours a day. The moderators will vet it and get it answered for you, and that's what we're here for. So I was so enthralled by the education you guys were giving us that I missed that we had a question over here. So on the way out, we're going to answer one question. Jason Rivera asks, if you're PCSing and thinking of renting or selling your existing home prior to your move, when should you be talking to a realtor or property manager? Is the week of enough time to do that?
No, you need to talk to them right now. I'd say probably get a good game plan established, probably about 4 months out. You also, if you're going to list your house for sale, you need to make sure that your house is good to go. Make sure your house is in good maintenance standing, okay? The market is slightly shifting. Well, it's not all the way a buyer's market. Buyers are being a little bit more picky. And if you want to rent your house, you have to understand, is your house going to be good to go for renters? If you have a pool, things like that, you need to explore what, if any, limitations there are, if you need to get HOA permission, things like that. So the more time, the better.
And that, there's a theme you're probably seeing here tonight. The more time, the better. It's never too early. Give yourself more time. The best way to have a stressful, unpleasant experience is wait till the last minute and hope it all works out. So my theory is to do the opposite. So again, we're running up on an hour here. I think we covered just about everything that you need to know. If there is any questions that you have that we didn't answer, again, go out to the Vetted VA group, post it, and you'll get the answers that you need. To all four of you, thanks for spending an hour with us tonight. We appreciate it.
Thanks for hosting, Josh.
Thank
Always
you.
a pleasure.
Awesome. Have a good one, guys.
All right. Bye, guys.